2:17 am. The blue light from Sarah's phone illuminated her face in the darkness of their bedroom. James's steady breathing beside her seemed suddenly suffocating as she stared at the message that had just popped up on their shared iPad. Missing our secret lunch talks. You understand me in ways she never could. Tomorrow, same place. Need to see you before the Henderson pitch. The message to Claire had obviously been meant for James's phone, not their synchronized iPad that he'd forgotten to disconnect. Sarah's fingers trembled as she opened their message history, each scroll revealing another crack in her reality. That blue dress you wore today? Couldn't focus in the meeting. Sarah's getting suspicious. Had to buy her that necklace she wanted. You're the only one who gets my vision, both at work and, 3 months of messages unfolded before her, a digital trail of betrayal. Photos of intimate lunches, inside jokes about office politics, subtle flirtations wrapped in professional courtesy. But what struck Sarah hardest weren't the hints of physical attraction. It was the emotional intimacy that James had built with Claire while systematically dismantling Sarah's own confidence. She slipped out of bed, padding silently to their home office. The morning light was just beginning to creep through the window. He uses the same lines on everyone, Claire said, sliding a phone across the table at Thinking Cup, a coffee shop deliberately chosen for its distance from their usual haunts. Listen to this voicemail from last week. Sarah pressed play, her coffee growing cold beside her. James's voice emerged, tender and urgent. You're the only one who truly understands me. What we have is special. I've never connected with anyone like this before. He said those exact words to me 3 years ago, Sarah whispered, pulling out her own phone and playing an old video from their second date. The same phrases, the same inflections, even the same slight pause before special. It was like watching a performer perfect his routine. The autumn rain pelted the coffee shop windows as the two women pieced together a pattern spanning years. Claire, the former lawyer, had started documenting everything after the housewarming party. Her legal pad filled with dates, incidents, and witness names. There's more, Claire said, her hands wrapping tightly around her mug. Remember Jessica from HR who suddenly transferred last year? She sent me these. A series of screenshots appeared on Claire's laptop. More messages from James, identical to ones Sarah had received, identical to ones he'd sent Claire. But the real shock came from the workplace allegations. Subtle sabotage of female colleagues' projects, taking credit for others' work, creating divisions between team members to maintain control. He's been doing this for years, Sarah realized, her voice hollow. The way he isolates people, makes them dependent on his approval. It's all calculated. Look at this. Claire pulled up a dating app profile. My friend spotted it last week. He's using a slightly different name, but... That's our apartment in the background, Sarah finished, recognizing the distinctive bookshelf she'd arranged herself. And he's listed as single. Their phones buzzed simultaneously, James, checking on both of them with his trademark concern. They shared a knowing look before silencing their devices. I've been gathering evidence, Claire said, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. Not just for us. There are 3 other women from the office who've come forward. We're building a case for HR, but we need everything, Sarah finished, pulling out her own notebook. I have 3 years of emails, texts, financial records. The way he gradually took control of our joint accounts, insisted on managing my investments. They worked through the afternoon, 2 women united by betrayal, but strengthened by purpose. Each revelation brought pain but also clarity. Every piece of evidence was another brick in the foundation of their freedom. He's going to try to turn this around on us, Claire warned as the coffee shop lights came on, signaling evening's arrival. Make us look crazy, jealous, unprofessional. It's already starting at work. Sarah looked at the wall of evidence they'd built, thinking of all the times James had made her doubt her own judgment. Let him try, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. We have something he doesn't. What's that? The truth, and each other. The housewarming party for their renovated apartment felt like watching a play where Sarah knew all the lines, but couldn't stop the tragedy unfolding. Crystal glasses clinked, soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and the catering team moved silently through the crowd of 30 colleagues and friends. Everything was perfect, suffocatingly, deliberately perfect. From her position by the wine station, Sarah watched James perform his greatest hits. There was the childhood story about his grandmother's cooking that he used to charm new acquaintances. The self-deprecating joke about his golf game that always made senior partners laugh. The way he touched women's arms while listening, making each person feel uniquely seen. James has such a gift with people, Susan from the law firm gushed, accepting a refill of champagne. You're so lucky, Sarah. Most men barely remember their wives exist at parties. Sarah smiled tightly, her eyes fixed on James's performance across the room. Claire had arrived 20 minutes ago, wearing a black dress that Sarah had seen in one of their secret lunch photos. Now, she stood in James's orbit, playing her role perfectly. The talented colleague, the respectful distance, the professional admiration. But Sarah saw it all now. The way James used the exact same head tilt with Claire that he used when courting Sarah 3 years ago. The inside jokes masked as work references. Most telling was Claire's nervous habit of twisting her necklace, a gesture Sarah recognized from her own reflection, a subtle sign of anxiety that developed from walking on James's invisible eggshells. The renovation is stunning, Claire commented later, finding Sarah alone in the kitchen. The marble backsplash must have been your choice. James always said you had excellent taste. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Sarah noticed Claire's slightly trembling hands as she reached for a glass of water, saw the shadows under her makeup that matched Sarah's own concealed sleepless nights. He told me the same thing about you, Sarah replied quietly, watching Claire's facade crack for just a moment, especially about your taste in lunch spots. Their eyes met across the granite island. In that moment, something electric passed between them. Recognition, understanding, shared pain. Claire's fingers went to her necklace again, twisting the pendant exactly as Sarah used to do with her own jewelry before she'd consciously stopped the habit. Sarah. James's voice cut through the tension as he entered the kitchen, all warmth and charm. Come meet David from Morgan Stanley. He's fascinated by your work on the digital transformation project. As Sarah moved to follow James, she caught Claire's reflection in the kitchen window. The other woman was watching James with the same haunted expression Sarah had worn for months. A look of someone trapped in a beautiful lie, desperate to believe it could still be true. In that moment, Sarah felt something inside her finally break free. Not a heart that had been breaking slowly for months. No, this was the breaking of chains she hadn't even known she wore, the shattering of an illusion she desperately tried to preserve. The annual marketing conference buzzed with energy on the 40th floor of the New York Marriott Marquis. Sarah had just finished her presentation on digital brand storytelling, her heart still racing from the standing ovation. As attendees filed out of the conference room, she caught glimpses of praise in their conversations. Innovative approach, fresh perspective, game-changing strategy. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again, not James's girlfriend, not the perfect hostess, just Sarah Mitchell, marketing strategist and creative force. She'd written the presentation without running it by James first, breaking their usual pattern of him, improving her work. The success felt sweeter for it. The hotel bar, with its panoramic views of Manhattan's twinkling skyline, provided a perfect escape from the networking chaos. Sarah nursed a gin and tonic, scrolling through congratulatory messages. James's text stood out. Great job, babe. Though next time, maybe tone down the enthusiasm. It can come across as unprofessional. Her thumb hovered over the message, that familiar knot forming in her stomach. The part about emotional authenticity in social media campaigns was brilliant. A voice cut through her thoughts. Most people are too afraid to challenge the algorithm-first approach. Sarah looked up to find a woman sliding onto the adjacent bar stool. Her curly black hair was styled in a casual bob, and her blazer was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing intricate geometric tattoos. Everything about her seemed effortlessly cool in a way Sarah had always wished she could be. I'm Claire Anderson. She extended her hand with an easy smile. New project manager at Sterling and Chase. I believe you know James Bennett. Sarah's breath caught. Claire, the name from the text messages. But instead of the threatening presence she'd imagined, Claire radiated warmth and genuine interest. That presentation, pure genius. But I have to ask, what inspired the section about authenticity versus manufactured perfection? It felt personal. 3 hours and several drinks later, Sarah found herself sharing things she'd never voiced aloud. About growing up in a small town in Maine, dreaming of creative freedom. About the short stories she used to write before James convinced her to focus on practical pursuits. Claire listened intently, asking questions that made Sarah think deeper, laugh harder. You remind me of someone, Claire mused, stirring her Manhattan. Me, 2 years ago. Same look in your eyes. What look? Like you're trying to convince yourself that shrinking is the same as growing. The observation hit too close to home. Sarah changed the subject, but Claire's words echoed in her mind. As they discussed their careers, family dynamics, and dreams, Sarah realized how long it had been since she'd had a conversation this real, this unfiltered. James mentioned you're quite the office favorite, Sarah ventured, watching Claire's expression carefully. Something flickered across Claire's face. Concern? Recognition. Before she smoothly redirected the conversation. But that brief moment confirmed Sarah's suspicions. There was more to the story of James and Claire than either of them was ready to discuss. As the bar began to empty, Claire handed Sarah her business card. For when you're ready to talk about what's really going on, she said quietly, squeezing Sarah's hand before disappearing into the elevator. Sarah Mitchell's hands trembled as she wiped away the smudged mascara for the third time that morning. The bathroom mirror reflected more than just her tear-stained face. It showed the subtle changes that had crept into her features over the past 3 years. The confident sparkle in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a constant wariness that she tried desperately to hide. The sound of keys jingling at the front door made her heart race. James was back, right on schedule with their morning routine. The familiar aroma of her favorite hazelnut latte from their local coffee shop wafted through the apartment. This was his pattern. Every argument, every gaslighting session about suspicious texts or late nights at work would be followed by these calculated gestures of affection. Babe? His voice carried that perfect note of concern. I bought your coffee, and those chocolate croissants you love from Belleville Bakery. Sarah took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and stepped out of the bathroom. Their Boston apartment, a stunning corner unit in Back Bay with floor-to-ceiling windows, felt suddenly suffocating. James stood in their expertly decorated living room, looking like he'd stepped out of a J. Crew catalog in his perfectly pressed Oxford shirt and designer jeans. His smile, the one that had charmed her at that rooftop party 3 years ago, still made her stomach flip, but now with anxiety rather than butterflies. You didn't have to do that, she managed, accepting the coffee cup. The warmth seeped through the paper cup into her cold fingers. Of course I did. Last night was. He paused, running a hand through his artfully tousled hair. I hate when we fight. You know how much you mean to me. Sarah nodded, taking a sip of the perfectly made coffee. Last night's argument replayed in her mind. She'd found a text from someone named Claire on his phone when it buzzed during dinner. His explanation about a new project manager seemed reasonable, but something about his too quick response, the slight tension in his shoulders, felt off. Their apartment walls were covered with carefully curated memories. Photos from their trip to the Amalfi Coast, the charity gala where James had received an award for his community work, casual brunches with their equally successful friends. Their social media presence painted a picture of young professional bliss, the kind that garnered hundreds of likes and comments like relationship goals, and you two are perfect together. But perfection, Sarah was learning, could be its own kind of prison. As she watched James move through their morning routine, checking his Rolex, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror, rehearsing points for his morning meeting, she felt the familiar ache of loneliness. Even standing 3 feet apart, he felt unreachable. I'm thinking we should have dinner at La Spaglia tonight, James announced, checking his phone. I made reservations for 7. Wear that blue dress I got you for your birthday. It wasn't a question. Sarah's phone buzzed with notifications from their shared calendar, reminding her of their perfectly planned life. Charity board meetings, couples yoga, dinner with James's colleagues. Each appointment felt like another bar in her beautiful cage. "Sounds perfect," she replied, the words tasting bitter despite the sweet coffee on her tongue. Her friends' voices echoed in her head. "You're so lucky to have him. He's such a catch. You two are living the dream." But whose dream was it really?